Ashutosh, what do you think are the biggest challenges in Asia Pacific today?
Challenges. Well, I would probably start with talent, or rather I would say lack of enough talent. Because the whole world talks about how emerging markets, Asia, having a lot of them, China, Indonesia, India, Vietnam, is a huge growth opportunity for everyone, for our clients, for us, for the whole industry, which it is, no doubt. I mean, that's where the consumers are buying more and more and getting more prosperous. So clearly for our clients, it's a big growth area. So what really comes in the way is just the fact that the industry, our industry, in most of these countries has just not been around for long enough. So therefore you just don't have enough talent on the ground to actually be able to convert these opportunities into real business. So yeah, there are lots of clients out there, there's a lot of work happening, but you just don't have enough people to go out and do the work. And to my mind, that's the single biggest challenge. How about Europe?
Well, Europe, I think it has very similar parallels in the sense that the communication world is changing so quickly, probably faster than the actual economy, which is kind of flat, very minimal growth. So talent is always going to be even a challenge for us. I don't think to the extreme that it is in Asia. I think in many parts, actually, a lot of European talent actually leaves to go to Asia, partially because they see it as a way to grow their career at a much faster rate than what they can do in Europe, who I think personally still tends to be quite traditional in terms of how it approaches careers and evolution. And to some extent, even though you could argue that Western Europe is more developed, in many cases I think our clients are still very much reliant on the old world, TV, and even though there's lots of talk about digital, mobile, but we haven't actually seen that come to fruition in a really big way. And I think much of the talent in Europe ends up, particularly the young talent, sees more opportunity and more dynamic capabilities and opportunities in Asia. I know myself, what's one of the reasons why, though I'm now in Europe, when I was in my 20s, I worked for 8 years in Asia. For that exact reason, to get that opportunity to grow my career and to experience the excitement of Asia. And I think that's one of the things that I think Asia has as an advantage that Europe actually doesn't have. And I think Europe really needs to change that if it's going to get itself out of this kind of, stagnant economic situation. One of my interesting, talking more and more to clients and seeing more clients in Europe, squeezing their budgets, reducing their budgets, and all of that going over to you, going into Asia. So I think what's interesting for me is I'm watching my business actually still being requested to do the same amount of work but for less, right? And with a slower growth rate. Yours is actually growing much faster. Question for you is, do you think it is requires a different management style, a different kind of leadership style to manage a growth market like Asia versus one that's not?
I would. So we already talked about the challenges. I mean, some of the challenges are therefore probably similar, lack of talent and therefore not being able to capitalize on the growth opportunity which is there.
Do you think it's easier though? Do you think it's easier to manage Asia because it's growing and there's opportunities? I think it is.
Yeah, well, grass is always greener on the other side, Helen. But I would say it's equally challenging because, yes, on paper there is great growth opportunity, but to convert it into reality is equally tough in that environment. Why? I mean, one is just the sheer complexity of those markets. So while you talk from a European perspective about a mature market, but traditional mindsets of clients. In our case, it's many markets coexisting at the same time, coupled with the traditional mindset. So go to a country like Vietnam, huge amount of rural population living in villages. The way clients like Unilever would market to communities out there would be really by reaching out to their communities through events, promotions, local area activation. At the same time, you've got a a lot of youngsters just entering the workforce, living in Ho Chi Minh City, who are all highly connected, all on social media, and there is a very different way of marketing to them and connecting with them.
So you're saying it's tougher?
So it's tougher because therefore the talent which you need in the agency has to deal with very extreme sort of level of complexities in reaching out to consumers for our clients, because there is that diversity.
All right, so what do you think the challenges are then in Europe? Actually, that's a curious question. So what you working in Asia, what do you think my challenges are?
It's more mindset, isn't it? Because it is a mature market. Growth is hard to find for all our clients. People already have reached a certain sort of standard of living, and therefore they are consuming, and it's clients who are competing with each other for market share, right? So it's and therefore all the issues which are related to a market like that I would imagine be related to, therefore, can I do things at a lower cost? How can I pare down my cost of business? And therefore there's a lot of focus on managing costs rather than managing the top line.
No, it is. I mean, I think it is about managing costs. It's also, I think, it's also about justifying that cost, so that every dollar or every euro spent has to be accountable. Yes. And that's one of the challenges, is that there is this juxtaposition between making it, wanting to do innovative new things, but having a very limited budget and having lots of cost pressure on it to make sure that you extract the most value from that budget to deliver the best sales, market share, etc. So the challenge for our guys is that not only do we have to be innovative and try different things, but we also have to show how those new things are going to actually deliver to the client's bottom line as well. And I think for us that makes it, in some respects, even doubly challenging, because at the same time there's very little risk appetite for us. Yes. And I think potentially in a growth market, because it's growing, there is the propensity to be a bit more risky. So to take the model that we always talk about with our clients about, 70, 20, 10, all right, to say 70% of your money should be spent on stuff, the media that will work, 20 should be on the stuff, the channels like Facebook that we know a lot about, but it's not 100%. And the 10% should be for test and learn, experimental stuff. And that's really, really hard to do in Europe. I reckon actually it's much easier to do or to push that in Asia. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, for a certain set of clients, and I guess clients who are marketing to consumers who are now upscale, evolved, and who you would find anywhere in the world. So probably to that segment, I think that's very true. But I mean, just to give you an example, so let's take a market like India. So what happens, and if you have a big client like Unilever, so you will find that within what is supposedly one market, it's actually three very different sort of markets within one. So at the top end, you have a huge set of, a huge market, in fact, probably bigger than the entire population of Australia, with the average per capita income of more than the average Australian. Then you have a vast middle somewhere, which is probably population of the size of a Mexico, which is a middle income country, with the average purchasing power of a Mexican. And then you have another huge chunk of people, which is probably the population of sub-Saharan Africa, with the average per capita income of a person in sub-Saharan Africa. So when you look at brands which are marketing in that context, so the top end, I think we find that those consumers are like what you find in all the mature markets. That's so the way you market to them is very similar, and therefore the approach which you just described in Europe is probably what is applied. But then you have the other two segments, which are extremely different, and the challenge in front of brands is, how do you get to the right mix for those segments as well? Because you can't build a business just on that top segment. So, and that has huge implications, I think, therefore, for the kind of work which our clients do, which we do, the type of talent that you deploy, the business model which is at work, both for our clients and for us, in activating all their marketing plans with consumer segments which are so diverse. So it just makes the whole challenge far more complex, because forever you are grappling with very, very diverse set of consumer segments with very different purchasing power, very different aspirations, and the approach to marketing being so radically different. So that to my mind is probably the single biggest challenge which faces us and our clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Europe is not exactly a single amorphous, it is not as probably as diverse in terms of its constructs as Asia, but I think there are differences in, and many sort of anomalies, that the IT infrastructure, the mobile infrastructure and the broadband infrastructure in Romania is better than it is in the UK. So even you do find, on a different scale, you do find that it's not all the same, and that there are lots of surprises.
In Europe itself, yes.
And it's one of the great things you always learn, and new things working across all the markets. My observation is that it's much easier to do things across markets in Asia than it is in Europe. Do you find that? Would you agree or not?
It's an interesting question. Look, I've never worked in Europe, so I can't directly compare, but you have. But I would say the one thing which I find across most of Asia is because probably our generation and the generation which has come after us are the first ones which have seen a dramatic change in their purchasing power and their lifestyles. And of course, the evolution of infrastructure and the society as a whole. So what you find is tremendous openness to change and new ideas.
I think that's one of the big, I think for me, that's one of the biggest differences, I think, between Asia and Europe. Yeah. I think that partially because of the economy, partially because I think Europe, even though there is a European Union, doesn't operate that, partially because of the way media owners, they're not really pan-European media owners, that it tends to be a group of fiefdoms, whereas I think in Asia, partially because there is much more, I find in Asia, there's much more of an interest in what is happening outside of Asia and bringing things in, whereas Europe, in some cases, it can be a case of not invented here and wanting to build stuff bottom up and not really be interested in what's coming in from the outside. And I think that's one of the things that I struggle with in terms of trying to, and what our clients want us to do more, is with economies of scale and doing more things like content across markets. And I find it one of the big challenges is actually as an agency which has one of the best networks and one of the best people, that it does require an inordinate amount of effort to do that. And I find in Asia it seems to be a lot easier to do.
It is, and I'd probably...
So you should be doing more, Ashutosh.
Yeah, I'd probably give the best example which I can give you therefore is the mobility of talent around Asia itself. It's the reason which you're talking about, it's pretty much that, because you've lived there. So culturally there, if you go to Japan or to China or to Thailand or to India or to Australia, I mean, they're culturally as diverse as you can get anywhere in the world. But what's common, interestingly, is because in each of these countries you've got a whole set of people in the workforce who've grown up in life dealing with a lot of complexity, and therefore are I think there are a couple of things which stand out because of that sort of upbringing. One is just the sheer openness to try out new things, new ideas. The second is adaptability. The fact that they would have probably grown up in a far more adverse time when there was lack of infrastructure, lack of money, and therefore you had to be extremely resourceful in getting anywhere in life. Now that's a tremendous lesson which I think everyone growing up in Asia and that generation has learned. How to be resourceful, how to do more with less. And that that along with this sort of thirst for knowledge and to better yourself in life, and that ambition that I have to pull myself up from a certain social class into someone who's an achiever, is so strong that you find that people are highly adaptable. So between India and China, culturally they're very, very different. So when we can say Asia, but it's like Greece to England or Russia to France. I mean, the different language, different everything. It's exactly the same. But because of this quality of just the adaptability and this sort of thirst for doing new things, you find that it's easier for us to move people around because they adapt very well in a different environment, and there is this desire to go and try out new things in different places.
Do you think, changing the subject, do you think, because the other thing that occurred to me was one of the big differences is that we talk a lot about, adaptive marketing, adaptive planning.
Yes.
Steve and Norm were here earlier, presumably debating all of that.
Yes.
What do you think the difference is between the interpretation of that in your region versus mine? Because I think that they might be quite different in terms of how we actually activate that and how we implement it.
Yeah, so I would look at it two ways. So if I look at it culturally, I think there will be great appetite for that approach. Because, I mean...
But do you think it's really applicable? Do you think adaptive marketing is...
I think it is essential, but the problem which we will face is, given relatively less infrastructure in Asia, is it's probably easier for you to gather and harness all that data and to actually bring it to life, whereas in most of Asia we are still a distance away from that, and it will probably take Asia another 5 years to get there, and just in terms of the sheer basic infrastructure to...
Which means I have to work. I have to get
there.
I have to get there
you
first.
You have to try it out.
I have to get there first.
And then we'll happily
no pressure.
take it.
No pressure. No pressure. Okay. Well, no, because that was the other thing as well. Because we talk a lot about adaptive marketing, adaptive planning, and within the construct of the two different ones, whether it be Asia Pacific or Latin America,
right,
or even the differences, US and Europe, even between the US and Europe, I think there's a big difference between. Yes. I think the opportunity in the US is tremendous, given the size of the clients and the scale. I think within Europe, because Europe is not just one country, I think and even that within Europe there are kind of shades of grey, so to speak. I think it is going to be a challenge for us. And I think for me, one of the things I want to do is focus on making that a reality in a few kind of citadel markets. So to make sure for me that I choose a couple markets that are going to be the benchmark and then roll that out. And I was even thinking to some extent of, doing hubs, so doing it in certain markets rather than trying to, because even though you have a talent challenge, also the same talent challenge exists for us, but particularly in these niche areas like adaptive marketing, et cetera, with it being all the agencies now are talking about it, everyone's talking about pay, don't earn, but it really hasn't come into a really big force. It tends to still be now living in PowerPoint than it does actually live in the day-to-day trading environment, the day-to-day planning environment. So one of the things I want to do is hub certain specialisms out. And I was wondering if is that something, given the challenges you have in Asia, are you looking at using certain markets as kind of hubs, or are you planning on unilaterally
for very much the same reason? And I think when looking back at, I think one of the advantages that we have is the fact that there is a pool of people around the world, the fact that there is a global network. So if you do certain things in Europe, for us in Asia, it's fairly easy to
steal them,
pick it up and steal with pride and apply it somewhere else. And again,
that's what we're here for, Ashutosh.
The fact that you don't get the talent in every single office or every market to be able to apply it means that, and as a global network, you can still put some central teams together, share that talent, because that's the way we work, and therefore get the agenda going at least in some of the places. So, I mean, that really would be the approach. Like you're saying, it would pretty much be the same hub and spoke approach in Asia as well. And I think it's fairly easy for us to work there for the reasons which we just talked about, because people have worked in different markets, they have their own network of people. No, but the real challenge, I think, for emerging markets is not so much cost management, but inflation management. And I'm saying this inflation across the business. So it's inflation in our clients' businesses, it's inflation in media, it's inflation in terms of cost of talent in our business. It's everywhere, because that is probably the one common thing in all those places, is that there is always, the good things are always available in short supply, and therefore you just end up paying premiums over there. When you look at our clients and the cost of procurement of raw material, You look at, like I said, talent, everything is in short supply and there are many takers for a limited set of goodies. So the bigger challenge in those markets is really how do you manage the inflation. So therefore the package of things which clients would want would pretty much be managed around that. There is growth, there is organic growth in the markets because population is exploding and more people now have the money to buy things. But at the same time, the cost of doing business is also inflating at a faster rate than the GDP growth in most of those countries. So there's the single biggest expectation becomes that.
No, it is tough. I mean, one of the challenges in Europe that we have is managing an expectation, but also in a very competitive marketplace, differentiating ourselves from other agencies, other agency groups. And it's an interesting exercise because you have various different levers. You have you have your buying power, right? You have your strategy, ideas, tools, capabilities, and you also have people. Right? Those are roughly the three.
Right.
Someone might say four,
Right.
or three. And I find it really tough in a market where every new piece of business, particularly in Europe, big piece of business, it is extremely competitive. Cost and the cost of buying media is now almost a commodity, right? And the challenge for me and the challenge for all of us in Europe is how do we, with that taking, our traditional business model has always been about making the most of that. How can we do that the most effectively?
Right.
For me now, if that is in decline, what are the other ways how can we move into other areas? One of the challenges I have is that we tend to sometimes use value add services and almost give them, away and not create any value with the client for them.
Yeah.
So for me, do you think in Asia there is still flex in the buying bit?
Yeah, I touch wood, I think we are still in a relatively
Can I relax?
better off place.
Can I relax and let you do the hard lifting for the next couple of years?
You wish. But yeah, I would say so. Look, we all worry about commoditization of the business, and it's probably a lot more commoditized in reality in Europe and in the US. What's probably different in Asia and most emerging markets around the world, so it's Asia, LATAM, Russia, all these countries, in everywhere, we were probably the early entrants in most of these markets, much ahead of our competitors. So I think what that did was it gave us scale at a level, so that scale still continues to be a differentiation. Unlike Europe, in most of these markets, scale for us continues to be a differentiator. Where we lose out with clients is typically where they would think that we don't have all the talent, given that we have huge pool of clients already. We may just not have enough talent to do justice to them. It's maybe a chemistry issue with the team which we've put forward in a pitch. These are the typical reasons why we don't win some of the businesses.
I think a lot of the Western brands are going east. So a lot of our big clients are investing heavily in Asia Pacific. But I think one of the things that's probably coming up soon is actually some of the Eastern brands coming west. So during the Olympics, we saw the first time a Chinese brand advertising on the buses in London.
Right.
And I think that's something that it's going to be an interesting phenomenon seeing that come this way. And it may be in their current format or it may be in a more westernized format.
Yes.
So I think that's going to be probably an interesting shift to say, okay, how does that work? How do we manage that? How do we manage the culture, going east to west? Because I don't think anyone's really that's not really kind of a common phenomenon.
So maybe have you thought of talent swap?
A talent swap, maybe I can get some back.
Yes.
Get some back.
Not get some back, get some in return.
We'll get some back, but I do think that, I think part of injecting in some degree of optimism and being also part of a global network is actually the talent shouldn't always be a one-way street.
Yes,
it shouldn't be going that, but it should be giving opportunity for the talented people we have, whether it be in Malaysia, whether it be in China, whether it be in Vietnam, to come to, to come to Europe.
Yes.
to work, to kind of infuse us with a different perspective, and to get ready for that sea change. Because I think that as the global superpowers are changing, so with the rise of China and other brands coming out of it, it is a matter of time before that becomes coming here.
I agree. I think that certainly is the opportunity of the next few years, because there will be, and it opens up therefore two kinds of opportunities. One is, I think we are a global network, so it's a great business model because you can help a big Chinese company aspiring to become a global player,
or even an Indian company.
Yeah, or an Indian company to step onto a global stage and leverage our network to do that, which again means, so we've got great product expertise in the mature markets, and we've got people who have the kind of attitude which you talked about towards our business in markets in Asia. So you put the two together and you get a great combination of things. So, but you need to build that around something which is likely to be these global clients of tomorrow. Today they are big players in China and India, but we probably have to build our business around the expansion of these clients globally, and that's where the reverse transfusion of talent and the continued sort of application of skills which you have in the mature markets would come together.
Right, so we can start bringing those media dollars, bringing them back this way, back to me.
The ones which they have earned from Europe, would come back into Europe. That's
without right. in. Well, so that would be something, that would be quite good to see, and quite something very nice to see actually, that Europe was not flat, but actually growing again. Yes. That would be quite nice to see. I think I'm going to actually, it's very emotional, say my dad actually. My dad's an academic, and he has always been one who has been, it's more about learning different things, more about the new challenge, trying your hand at different things. It's not so much about making a career choice and doing the steps, but it's more about, learning, being open to different things, and never being afraid to try something different, to change, to evolve, to do something new. So, my dad. I'm staying is probably a more interesting answer than what brought me to Mindshare, because I think for quite a few people, whenever I talk to people about why they came to, or they entered media, it was never actually a defined career path. It was something they ended up doing, just by, they knew someone, or they worked in a creative agency and they've moved over, or etc., kind of like falling into it almost. So it's not really about why that I've come to Mindshare, but I think it's more about why I'm staying at Mindshare. And the reason why I'm staying at Mindshare is, one, is the people. I really like the people. I think it's an organization that is very focused, very direct, very focused on, what are we going to do? Let's all do it together. Minimal politics, and everyone's always accessible, and it's quite fun. It's quite a fun place to be, and we're doing really interesting things. So I think we're doing a lot less of the talking and a lot more of the actual doing. Particularly new tools, new ideas, and we're never one to shy away from a challenge. Yeah. Well, I think the worst thing about the media industry is, I think that one of the frustrations I have is that everything is, we can talk about strategy, we can talk about new ideas, but if you don't buy cheap media, that's it, right? That's the table stake. And I think sometimes that actually cheap media isn't the right answer. It's not even the right question, right? It's about, how do you drive your business, right? It's about a more intelligent application. It's the frustration I have, is that the clients talk about, and the industry talks about, a new way of thinking, a new kind of area of exploration, but yet we are still, to some extent, held prisoner almost by pricing grids, which gives you how cheap can you buy this spot on this TV station at this time period. And that, to me, isn't going to help drive a brand. There's much more other things that can do to help drive the brand growth and the success. That's not going to be a single Excel sheet. So I think the answer is mad math men. So I don't think that it's a choice of either or. I think it is about data. It is about understanding that data, but it's about the creativity. It's about the creativity and the insight that data gives us. But it's also about how we can use that data creatively, how we can use it in a different way that no one's ever thought about it before. And by putting it together and having the people who are completely focused on it, and then that out from it comes some brilliant possibilities, new insights, new ideas, a new way to approach a channel, new insight in terms of how you can drive your product, etc. So I think it is the mad math men.
Monsters.
Monsters even. The pros, it's global. I think it's really quite exciting to actually have that intellectual, stimulus and kind of figuring out what's going on in different places and what can I learn from here and what can I learn from there. The con is that it can be bureaucratic, that it can be, there's lots of forms and templates and things that it can sometimes feel like, where are we going with this? So it's a bureaucracy, and it can be slow, exactly.
Yeah.
The share in Mindshare means Nick Emery giving me a pat on the back every day and saying, thank you for coming to work today. No, that'll never happen. The share in Mindshare for me is what Mindshare is about, which is our network. It is about us really being open to taking the good from different regions, from different clients, for the betterment of everyone. So it is a kind of a social share as well, because it's a great bunch of people to work with.